Hello, welcome to Talking the Secret Doctrine. My name is Dr. Don Franklin Shepherd, and today we will be looking at the first sloka in the first stanza of the Secret Doctrine on pages 35 and 36. Once again, we are using the verbatim edition of the Secret Doctrine published by Theosophical University Press in Pasadena, California. So let's start with stanza 1. Here H.P. Blavatsky writes that the eternal parent, space, wrapped in her ever-invisible robes, had slumbered once again for 7 eternities. And she goes on to say that the parent space is the eternal, ever-present cause of all, the incomprehensible deity, whose invisible robes are the mystic root of all matter and of the universe. Now, we've already encountered motion in space previously in the Secret Doctrine, where motion, consciousness, was a reference to Para-Brahman, or the first logos, and space, the dull black ground, was a reference to the second logos. So we know here in the stanza that she's dealing with Mula Prakriti, and this will become very important in a moment. And she says that this Mula Prakriti is the mystic root of all matter and of the universe. So she gives the key away right there. It's the root of all matter, referencing the third logos, or Prakriti, and of the universe, representing the sevenfold mundane egg. So right there at the very beginning, she's already given her layout for the scheme that is to follow. That is Mula Prakriti as the second logos, the matter that follows, the Prakriti, as the third logos, and of the universe, which is the mundane egg. And let's continue. She goes on to say that space, in the sense the abstract space of Mula Prakriti, is the one eternal thing that we can most easily imagine, immovable in its abstraction and uninfluenced by either the presence or absence in it of an objective universe. The best way to imagine this is to sit in a chair and to look at the objects around you, the books, the rocks, the water, the birds. It's all there present in all its fullness. But if we close our eyes, we'll see darkness inside. And we won't see any movement at first. It will be complete stillness. And in that stillness, we will notice that the books and the rocks and the birds and the water don't exist. In a very simple way, in a very general way, this is the difference between Mula Prakriti and our universe. She goes on to say that it is without dimension in every sense and self-existence. Now she goes on in the next paragraph to say that the robes stand for the noumenon of undifferentiated cosmic matter. Oftentimes, when we see the word cosmos spelled with a C, cosmic matter, in the Secret Doctrine, we're dealing with the sevenfold mundane egg. So once again, here is the giveaway that H.P. Blavatsky is dealing with something above the sevenfold universe. That is, she's dealing with Prakriti more directly, and even higher, Mula Prakriti. She continues in that paragraph to talk about this root nature until she gets to the very end, confirming the identification of this eternal parent space with Mula Prakriti. The Hindus call it Mula Prakriti, and say that it is the primordial substance which is the basis of the upadi, or vehicle of every phenomenon, whether physical, mental, or psychic. It is the source from which Akasha radiates. And here she gives away the key again. We have Mula Prakriti as the second logos, and this Mula Prakriti is a basis of the upadi, or the vehicle of phenomenon. So we know there she's talking about the third logos, or Prakriti. But she continues, and she says it is a source from which Akasha radiates. we know that in its highest form, Akasha is the 7th layer of the mundane egg. And so she has once again displayed the same pattern that we discussed earlier. We have Mula Prakriti, the second logos, the dull black ground, emanating Prakriti, the matter concretized from that dull black ground, to Akasha, the highest layer of the sevenfold mundane egg. So when we deal with the time scales in the next part of the first stanza, we understand that she's dealing with these three things. We now have a reference point. So let's go ahead and take a look. She writes under the next part, by the 7 eternities, eons or periods are meant. And she goes on to give a time scale to all of this. And this is what she will ultimately say on page 36. The 7 eternities meant are the 7 periods or a period answering in its duration to the 7 periods of a Manvantara and extending throughout a Mahakalpa or the Great Age, 100 years of Brahma, making a total of 311 trillion 40 billion years, each year of Brahma being composed of 360 days and of the same number of nights of Brahma. What is she referring to here? It's a very deep and profound question. Well, we already know she's referring to Mula Prakriti, the second logos, Prakriti, the underside of the third logos, and Akasha as the highest 7th layer of the mundane egg. Well, let's take a look at Helen Blavatsky to get a sense then of what's going on there. And I picked out a couple of quotes that do give a sense of what is going on here from Isis Unveiled, once again published by Theosophical University Press out of Pasadena, California. And if we take a look at Isis Unveiled, we can get a sense of what she is referring to when she refers to as Brahma, and when she's referring to this 311 trillion year cycle. She writes on page 132, all the sun gods, with their symbol, the visible sun, are the creators of physical nature only. The spiritual is the work of the highest God, the concealed, the central spiritual sun, and of his demiurge, the divine mind of Plato. So we are dealing with two things when we're dealing with the 311 trillion year cycle in this case. We are dealing with the solar suns over a solar system, and we're also dealing with the great central sun. Now, where's our reference point in Blavatsky and the Secret Doctrine to demonstrate that? Well, the reference point is Akasha. Akasha is the 7th layer of the mundane egg. And so when she refers to Akasha emanating out of Prakriti and Mula Prakriti, we know that she's referring to the great central sun. Now, we get confirmation of this, of the great central sun, in the second volume of the Secret Doctrine on page 241. And in the second volume of the Secret Doctrine, she writes, they are 3, synthesized by the 4th, the first and highest, which is called the central sun in the Kabbalistic doctrine. And she continues to talk about this central sun, this highest of the 7 in the mundane egg, the 7th layer. And she writes that the Kabbalah teaches from the central spiritual sun and group the second, the polar sun, which too radiate on man his Atma. So this great central spiritual sun and this Akasha are one and the same. Further, let's take a look at a book that I have found useful, again published by Theosophical University Press, Fundamentals of the Esoteric Philosophy, when dealing with this cycle of 311 trillion years. and looking at how it deals with solar suns and the central suns. On page 184, Gottfried de Pucker writes, "At the present period, we have lived somewhat more than half of the Mahamanvantaric cycle. We are, for the Mahamanvantara of our cosmical solar system, at the point where matter has already reached its ultimate degree of development in our hierarchy. We have lived, according to the ancient numerical teaching, 155,520 odd billion solar years. One half of our Mahamanvantara is gone, and there still remain nearly 155,520 billion solar years." So he uses the word cosmical solar system, which is also referred to as universal solar system at times in his writings, because we are dealing with the relationship of solar suns and the great central spiritual sun. On another reference, he develops it further on page 468 when he writes here, "We are told that Brahma lives 100 of his years. Brahma, remember, is a Sanskrit word standing for the spiritual energy consciousness side of our solar universe. Our solar system, and the egg of Brahma, is that solar system. We are further told that his life is half ended, 50 of his years are gone, a figure which we express in 15 figures of ours, in this case 155 trillions, 520 billions. So we're dealing with the solar suns when we're looking at this 311 trillion cycle, and we're dealing with the great central spiritual sun as Akasha when looking at it. One more quote from H.P. Blavatsky's Isis Unveiled. In this case, we're going to be looking at pages 270 to 271. And when you actually look at those pages, you see that, again, she's developing the relationship of the sun and the central sun. Here she writes on 270, "It is said that the sun is the soul of all things. All has proceeded out of it and will return to it, which shows that the sun is meant allegorically here and refers to the central invisible sun, God, whose first manifestation was Sephira, the emanation of Ensof, light in short." So when we return to the 311 trillion year cycle and refer to this name of Brahma, with Brahma we're referring to two things really. We're referring to Brahma in terms of the solar system. And our solar sun and the solar system live hundreds and hundreds of lives within this 311 trillion year period. We're also referring to the spirit consciousness side of this solar system, which is the great central sun. And the great central sun corresponds to the seventh layer of the mundane egg. Now, this great central sun comes alive when the central point as the third logos tinctures it. And we can place the tincturing of the great central sun as Akasha by the third logos at around 155 trillion years ago as part of a 311 trillion year cycle. So we're dealing with a central sun cycle being tinctured by the third logos, and we're also dealing with a cycle of the solar suns living within the cosmical solar system underneath that great central sun. Of course, we must remember that when we look at the 311 trillion years, this is not the total cycle. H.P. Blavatsky writes, and we have to be very cognizant of it. The 7 eternities meant are the 7 periods, or a period answering in its duration to the 7 periods of a Manvantara, and extending throughout a Mahakalpa, or the Great Age. So the Great Age is 311 trillion years, but the 7 eternities are in fact a period answering to it. And this period answering to it is another 311 trillion years, thereby giving us a cycle, the largest cycle openly discussed in the Secret Doctrine, 622 trillion years. So when we're looking at the Mahakalpa, the Great Age, during which this manifested universe is living and vibrant, and then when we're looking at the Mahapralaya, when it dissolves, we're looking at a larger cycle than 622 trillion years. When we look at that word Brahma, and we look at it in terms of a solar system, we have to realize that this even division between 311 trillion years above and 311 trillion years below is based on the fact that the solar suns, representing the fourth layer of the mundane egg, equally spend time below and equally spend time above. Now, other type of suns may differ, but H.P. Blavatsky doesn't discuss this in detail. The 311 trillion year Mahamanvantara corresponds to the time that the solar sun is living below in the Great Age, and the 7 eternities in the Mahapralaya are referring to the time that the solar sun spends above the mundane egg. The cycle of the great central sun is not openly discussed in terms of how its cycles work within the 311 trillion years Great Age and the 311 trillion year Mahapralaya. That's something that is not openly discussed. And H.P. Blavatsky says that in a number of places, that she's going to deal with the solar Brahma, the solar system, and she's not going to deal specifically with the Brahma of this great central spiritual sun. There's a lot in all this. It's very complicated. But I think looking at it this way, we can get a sense of the 311 trillion year cycle. If we remember that in this slokas, we have Mula Prakriti as the second logos, issuing Prakriti as the third logos, issuing Akasha as the seventh layer of the mundane egg. And then we look at the 311 trillion year cycle in relationship to how the third logos is the central point, tinctures the great central spiritual sun of the sevenfold mundane egg, and then how that cycle of the great spiritual sun runs through its various suns in the cosmical solar system over which it rules. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day.